In 1977, AC/DC was the biggest rock band in Australia and about to break the all-important American market. Bon Scott was the lead singer and Mark Evans was the bass player. And just before AC/DC went global, Mark Evans was sacked because of personal differences with founding member Angus Young. Yet during his 2 years with the band, Mark played on 3 of the band's seminal albums. Remember these? TNT, Dirty Deeds, Done Dirt Cheap, and the more mature, harder-edged album that helped launch the band overseas, Let There Be Rock. Now Mark Evans has written a memoir called Dirty Deeds. And it's not the warts and all story of rock and roll excess you might expect from a former rock star. It's about depression, betrayal, and the untimely death of his daughter Kristen. For the book show, Michael Spooner spoke with Mark Evans about his memoir. He begins by asking whether he feels lucky despite these tragedies and missed opportunities.
The answer is I feel very, very fortunate musically to be a part of something like that, because it's stuck with me, and I've got some cherished memories at that time. But yeah, the other bands I've been involved with too, and what is the music thing is given me a great capacity to travel over the years, which is something that I've always wanted to do since I was young. You know, on a personal level, the music is such a strong influence, particularly when it's your professional career. It can get in the way of the personal life, unfortunately, because just through geography, you can't be exactly where you want to be, like on your 21st birthday. You can't be at home. You've got to be on the road, whatever. But, yeah, musically, incredibly fortunate, fortunate.
Well, you really didn't have any partners or any children when you were within AC/DC.
No.
But given...
I was working on it.
Yeah, constantly, according to the book. Just on a serious note, of course, right at the end of your book, you touch on the personal tragedy within your own family, the death of your eldest daughter, Kristen.
Yeah.
Has this, an experience like that, suddenly created a whole new perspective for you about your whole life?
Oh, of course. Of course it has. You can't navigate your way through an experience like that.
But despite the book being 90% about AC/DC and 10% about your personal life, has it suddenly made you realise that perhaps for 30 years you might have felt hard done by the band, and perhaps you just stuck at it, you know, if you'd been in, you would have been in it for the big fame, the big money, and yet all of a sudden this has completely changed your sense of priorities?
Oh, no, I guess you're hinting that if I've had some sort of bitterness with my memories to the band. That's never been my way. I've always had a very philosophical view of it, and it really sort of comes down to this, that you know, if I was the right guy for the band, I'd still be there. So it's patently obvious that I'm not.
Look, philosophical is a word I've actually got written down here, because the voice that you present in the book is, I was amazed. It's a humble, philosophical book, accepting of your lot in life.
Yeah.
And yet you still call the book Dirty Deeds.
With the title of the book, it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, certainly. Certainly, it's when you think of the song Dirty Deeds, well, I've got to tell you, it's a Bon Scott lyric. But yeah, it's just a title that automatically suggested itself to me. I thought, well, that's a great thing. Because, you know, there's a couple of dirty deeds, you know.
Not too dirty. I'm actually going to suggest, play the devil's advocate and suggest that some hardcore AC/DC or rock fans might potentially be disappointed, because there's really no sort of real graphic, hardcore, salacious rock road stories a la Motley Crue, is there? There's a little bit, you're kind of circumspect and respectful. And
yeah, well, certainly, you know, if you were thinking about an X-rated version of the book, that certainly it could have been a possibility, but that's just not my way. Some of the biggest compliments I've got about the book is that it's from people who know me, reading the book, it's like talking to you. And I've just portrayed the story how I see fit to tell it.
I think you're a pragmatist, and you obviously get some of that from your mother. Just tell us briefly about your mother discovering you in a compromising position.
Oh, right, yes, yeah. Well, my mother is possibly my favourite person of all. She's just a wonderful, wonderful lady. But there was one time when I was at home, and I wasn't expecting my mother to be there, obviously. And she basically caught me in the sack with a young lady friend of mine, and she came in and she was quite taken aback. And oh, I'm sorry, you know. She was all sort of flustered, and then another one popped out from under the bed. So there was actually two in there, And he said, Mark Whitmore Evans, how many have you got in there? That's only 2, Mum. You know?
That is a priceless story. Bon, I'm sure you've been asked a lot of questions about Bon. Your affection for him was obvious. You talk about seeing him when you were back in Australia. He got his new, I think, Yamaha 1100 motorbike or something of that nature. But you also mentioned his loneliness, his boredom, the possibility he was going to do a solo project.
Yeah.
Do you think, given if he hadn't died when he did, do you think he may have stayed with the band for a long time, or might they still have come to a parting of the ways?
No, I think Bon was in that band forever. But I could never, it seemed, not in the band. I know Bon's musical tastes were heavily leaning towards things like Lynyrd Skynyrd and Little Feat. He liked that sort of, what would you call that, Southern
rock.
Yeah, he really did like that, and verging on country. I think there was a few of those influences in his band fraternity.
He's also cited once of saying that ZZ Top's album Tres Hombres, which was big and about, was one of his favourite albums.
Yeah.
Was that a big influence on AC/DC generally?
Oh, absolutely. It was one of my favourite albums before I joined the band, and it was one of the albums that was pointed at as being like, this is happening. It was sort of a general sort of mindset for once you're in AC/DC, you didn't really show a lot of reference or affection towards other bands, because as far as the band's mindset was, we were the only band that existed really, and that's that tunnel vision thing that has served the band very well, I think.
Concrete tube, cyanide, TNT,
Mark Evans, you mentioned in your book Dirty Deeds about the extreme stress and the depression that you suffered over relentless touring.
Yeah.
This is not something that people are really aware of, and it affects and breaks up a lot of bands, and really provides lifelong impacts on them. Divinal's another band that suffered relentless touring through the United States.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of an idea about how unglamorous being in a band and how tiring it could be to be in a band like AC/DC, trying to break into Britain.
Yeah, well, I think if you're looking at the touring band situation, you might be doing, say, 4 to 5 shows a week. It doesn't really matter where they are, because you're travelling, you're cocooned, you're in a plane, a tour bus, or whatever. So what you're basically doing, if a 24-hour block, you're hanging around for 23 hours and playing for an hour. My situation with AC/DC, I really felt that AC/DC only really existed when we're on stage. That's when the band's the band. That's when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's, might only be a 45-minute set or whatever. So there's a lot of time in the rest of the day where it can be tedious. It seems all very glamorous, traveling around the world. And it is. You can have a ball. But there's sometimes you can just be in hotel rooms by yourself going, why in the crikey am I doing this?
You mentioned a specific instance where you felt that your sanity had briefly deserted you. You were trying to break open a window to jump out that window. Would you have done that if you'd got that window open?
I've no doubt in my mind. I was, I was out the window. There's no question about that. I've got to tell you, it's still uncomfortable to talk about this now, because it's something that I see as being just so not me and just so wrong. I know, going back and revisiting that situation, I just wasn't thinking correctly. On that particular night, I was, not intoxicated or anything like that, no drugs or anything, but, I just know I wasn't thinking straight, because just the existence I was leading, where I felt that I really had no control over what I was doing, it was just, pure and simply depression.
And as an extension of that, when you were sacked from the band, you were devastated. I mean, you give a fairly graphic description about the meeting in which Phil sat with his hands on his knees looking down. Bon was looking at the sky, shaking his head. Angus didn't say a thing, zilch, zero, nil. But when you finally went away in the cab, you felt a tremendous release of weight off your shoulders.
Oh, it was...
despite being devastated.
It was equal amounts of feeling very close to being betrayed, but also after the initial shock of it, I felt this like a rush come over me, this massive rush, where it just went, oh my goodness, that's over. Phew, you know. But I'd go between the two for quite a period of time.
Because the half hour on stage makes up for that 23 and a half hours the rest of the day, doesn't it?
Well, that's why you do it. That's why you do it. You're in life to do that, you know. You're in a band, but the band is your lifestyle. That's it. But there was certainly a large amount of relief knowing that I was out of the band. But the same token, it was a double-edged sword. I'm thinking, oh, God, you know, it was, you know, I'd never thought that it would come to that.
Mark, there's a series of photos in your book, Dirty Deeds. One that I think says a lot without saying anything. It's of you receiving some gold records at the showground after the band's show back in Australia in 1981.
Yeah.
You're being presented the record by Mal. Phil is looking on with obvious affection and pleasure, I think, the drummer.
Yeah, fair. We're all, Malcolm, myself and Phil, we're all real good mates,
Yeah, and Angus is nowhere to be seen.
No, he's not there. I think Angus, because of his performance levels, he can cut up quite quickly after shows. It's a great photo.
I just think that it seems to say a lot. I mean, there's a lot you can't say because you've been through protracted legal dealings with the band over the years.
Yeah, correct.
And I think it's obvious that, and you've stated it, that you felt betrayed. There's a lot you can't say, and I think the inclusion of a photo like that, which kind of has the people who did look after you a little bit in the photo.
I think that's quite a reasonable way to look at the photo. To me, I put it. It's one of my favourite photos because, you know, I think it's a nice link to so people can see wasn't exactly I was out of the band and it stopped then. You know, our relationships, you know, stopped some while later, but I've just got great memories. That was a great night, and it was Brian's first gig, because I think Brian Johnson's in the photo too. That was Brian's first gig in definitely in Sydney. You know, it was Australia, but that was just a very interesting evening. Like hearing all those intros that I was so used to playing, then Bon not singing. You know, and I've got to tell you that the way the guys handled that transition.
Well,
I've just got so much respect for them. They're just amazing how they did it.
They rose to the occasion at the showground
absolutely.
gig. I was there at that gig. I was on the barrier.
Fantastic.
Swanee supported.
Yeah, that's right, Swanee. My mate Swanee. Yeah,
and they looked as nervous as all get out. And AC/DC were just, you know, they're pulling their destiny towards them. There really is an interesting sort of. They were totally confident of what they were doing.
I think they were just being AC/DC.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way the band is. It's business as usual.
And that's after the death of their lead singer, Bon Scott. Everyone thought the band may not continue then, but they did. But what about if Angus or Malcolm had to be replaced? Angus, to most people, seems the obvious figurehead of the band, but those who know the dynamic of the band talk of Malcolm as the driver. Would Mal be the hardest one to replace in that band, even though he's not the lead guitarist, he's the rhythm guitarist?
You wouldn't replace him. But they did it for a short while when Malcolm had to take some time off the road. Yeah. But he was. They got a nephew in. They got a Mel clone in there.
Yeah.
But it's similar, if not more radical than taking Keith out of the Stones. It just wouldn't happen. You know, without Malcolm, it's not the band.
Mm-hmm. Just lastly, if I may touch on something else you mentioned in the book, your book, Dirty Deeds, the vintage guitar business that you're in now.
Yeah.
A lot of people might think, guitars are a bit of toys and, you know, it's a bit of a waste of money.
How dare they?
Yeah, you hear people sort of scoffing when they're described as investments.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Give us an idea about how lucrative the vintage guitar business could be.
One of the great things about getting in the vintage business, I just shudder when I was a kid, you know, having old precision basses and repainting them and all that, and taking a great bit of the value off those pieces. But yeah, I got to meet some great people such as George Harrison from the Beatles.
Did he buy something when he was there?
Yeah, he bought a couple of Martin acoustic guitars from me, and it's just amazing, you know, when you meet someone like George Harrison, you know, you've pretty much known them all your life. And they just haven't known you. And it was so when he first came into the store, you know, we had to unlock the door, and I'll go let George in. And I said, George, you know, it's great to see you, come in, great to see you. And he had a limo drive. I said, well, you would like to bring your driver in? And he said, all he's done since the hotel is ask me about the Beatles. I don't care if he starves out there. So George has got a reputation of being somewhat prickly. But once he sat down, we had a cup of tea. Actually, maybe that's all a cup of tea. And he started telling Beatles stories. And if someone's like George Harrison's around, you listen. And it's just a beautiful moment. And once he found a lovely acoustic guitar and he started playing Norwegian Wood. And just, that's one of John's tunes. A beautiful, no kidding. Yeah, beautiful tune, George. No, I wouldn't have picked that up.
You're almost having an out-of-body experience thinking, what am I watching?
And the thing that sticks with me with spending time with George is when he'd break into song, and he'd do it quite regularly, what an amazing voice he had. He just had this fantastic singing voice, and I wasn't prepared for his voice to be that good, because when maybe he just didn't give it enough of a crack because John and Paul were having a good go at it. But beautiful voice, man, beautiful voice, just smooth and warm. Well, just a great character voice.
And you touched on George just referring to Paul McCartney as the bass player. What was going on there?
He was also he would talk about John Lennon in present tense, which was quite alarming because John had been gone for some time. He'd call Ringo Richie, which is, I could understand that because his name's Richie, Richard. But Paul was the I can't use the exact words, but he was the bass player. So mate, I don't know. I don't know what was going.
Was there an F in the word somewhere?
Yeah, there was, and it was said he was a tad thin-lipped while he was, say.
Wow.
It's a rock and roll band. It's, who knows.
Don't you love it? Mark Evans, AC/DC's original bass player, speaking there with Michael Spooner. The book is Dirty Deeds, and it's